Okay, well, it's 12:02. I'm going to get going. That's why we record these things, so that we can share them with people after the fact. Audrey is one of our team members. She's joined us today. And Audrey, here is the check-in QR code for Sam and Brittany. It's not going to take you long to do it. But if you can keep adding that to the chat as we move along, that will be helpful. Okay. Okay. So this is Pitch Decks 101. I'm Maggie. You've seen me before. And we are near the end. We have only this session and the session on Thursday to go. And so today is Pitch Decks, and then we're going to cover financials and fundraising on Thursday. So we're going to jump right in. The way that I set up this presentation is to kind of give an overview and then take it slide by slide and give good example. Well, first we give poor examples, and then we give a good example of each one of these slides. So the purpose of this slide deck is to tell the story of your startup. And in most cases, you're going to be presenting it to investors. But in some cases, it's a foundation that you can use to create a sales deck if you are presenting to potential customers, or if you're just sharing your business idea with other people. So for content, you want to know which of those audiences you are presenting to, whether it's investors or potential customers, or just kind of informational for other business people. You want to tell a story to make it interesting. And there are basic topics that we're going to cover that should be included, especially if it's for an investor group. For overall style and the way that you should be constructing your pitch decks, it's generally one idea per slide. You don't want to confuse people. If you're presenting it live, and that's what we're assuming, then you want to use a large font with very few words, and you want the story to flow, and that means that you can include pictures, images, graphs, and things that will capture people's attention. But when you're presenting it live, you are the focus. So it's your enthusiasm and your demeanor that should be holding the attention of the audience. And the slides are just there to emphasize what you're saying so that they can glance it, understand it, but your presentation is all about you. So the basic content includes the problem or pain point. Why does this company exist? And this is one of the ways that you can tell the story about it, is that you noticed this problem or pain point and wanted to solve it. And that's why you started the company. So we start with what's the pain point or problem. Then we're going to deliver the solution. And then we're going to talk about how big the market opportunity is. So if we're thinking in terms of a scalable business, investors will want to know how much potential there is out there if your product really takes hold in the marketplace. And so this is one of the ways that they gauge whether they can get the return that they're looking for from their investment. The business model is how you make money. Who are you selling to, and how are you selling it, and what are you charging? If you have a physical product, then you will include on this slide what it costs you to make it and what your margins are, what you're charging. If you have a software product that you're selling and it's software as a service, then you may have different tiers of customer that you're servicing. So you might have 3 different ways that you're describing it. Questions, Audrey?
No questions so far.
Okay. Feel free to put any questions in the chat or even unmute and interrupt. Okay. So the business model And then we move on to competition. I actually changed the order in the slides because competition is part of the market research that you will do. And so competition is closely related to the market. And so in the deck, when we're actually going through the topics, it comes right after market opportunity. And then traction. Traction is sales. Everything else are just milestones or goals. Traction is actual sales. And so if you do have sales, you definitely want to include that in your pitch deck. That makes investors sit up and notice, and they want to see how quickly you're growing, how much traction you have. The team are the people who are creating this company with you. We usually only want to see the co-founders, the people who are working in it every day. And we want a little bit of background. We want to see a picture. And then the last slide is, well, actually, it's not the last slide. The ask is an important slide. If you are presenting to investors, it describes the amount of money that you're looking for and what sort of vehicle you are talking about and possibly your valuation and use of funds. So let's get going. Okay, the problem. So you don't want to spend too much time on the problem. If you're looking to be a scalable business, the problem should be immediately understandable. The reason you started this company is because you noticed this pain point. You went out and did the customer validation type stuff that we talked about, and you've discovered that other people are experiencing this problem and are looking for a solution. So you don't have to spend a ton of time on this. When we talk about the timings for these different slides, it's based on a 10-minute pitch. So when we come to our demo day, it's only an 8-minute pitch. We compress it a little bit because we don't expect that you would have a ton of traction yet. You're going to only spend 1 minute describing this. You want to have an impactful image that goes along with it that sort of shows what the problem is and can act as a demonstration. So here we have next a poor example. And the reason this is a poor example is because there's a very distracting image that is actually hard to perceive. And then there's a lot of text on this slide, and there are acronyms as well, but at least this does explain it. And then we have a box with more text in it. And so this is very hard to sort of perceive what's going on. So I've actually remade this slide for the problem on the next slide. And that is 1 in 2 people will get cancer. And wouldn't you like to know what kind in advance? And that is saying basically the same stuff without all the jargon as this first slide. It's much easier to understand. It could be made prettier, but it's very simple. Right. And here is an example of somebody that is using images to describe the problem. So overheating is a real problem. We see an image of a car, the engine that's overheating. And then we see this gentleman on the left. And so his product was a donut that you could sit on that actually had cooling properties to keep his nether regions cool. So I thought this was an excellent example of showing the problem in 2 quick images. Now we're going to move on to the solution. So the solution, you can spend a little bit more time on the solution. You should use pictures if you have them. And I caution against doing a demo unless you have a physical product that you can show off very quickly and you don't spend a ton of time on doing the demo. If you have a web application or a piece of software, screenshots are very difficult to perceive in a pitch setting. Usually people want to put 2 or 3 screenshots up there, and it's just impossible to see what's going on the phone. I mean, when you're looking at a phone this close to it, sometimes it's hard to understand what's happening on the phone. So putting 2 or 3 of those on a slide is just really difficult. So you should be explaining how it's 10 times better than the current solutions out there. So again, we have a poor example to start. This was a company that was providing transportation for children to daycare centers. And the daycare centers were also part of their solution. So we have a couple things going on here. We have a ton of words and it's done in a font which is sort of associated with children. So I don't mind that, but there are just so many words. And then we have a picture of a phone with an image and with text messages on it. It's impossible to understand what's going on. In the transport vehicles where the children were being taken to the daycare center, they did have cameras. And so he's trying to demonstrate that the parents would be able to see what was going on with their kids while they're in the transportation vehicle, but also while they're at the daycare center. So this was not a very good description of how to do this, not helpful. On the other hand, we have the all-day adventure flask. And I love this solution slide. Even though it has many images, what it's doing is showing us the whole unit on the left, and then the different ways that this flask can be used. So this company, High Bear, he and his wife would go hiking, and they really missed good coffee. And so they created it mostly, first off, to do pour-over coffee. And they have the strainer. You can also mix cocktails in here. And on the far right, there's a thermal core where you can chill it, keep it frozen, and it will actually chill your beverage. If you look at the background, you can see that it is subtle, and yet it's understandable that they have a elevation thing. I forget what the hell it's called, but they have different mountains with their elevations, and the topographical map, that's what it's called. So it's very on theme with what their product is. So this is a very nice slide, and the founder tells the story while we're looking at this image. Question?
There's no questions in the chat.
Okay, I'm hearing some background noise. Okay, next up is the market. And remember, the market opportunity is of interest to investors, so they know how large the potential is for your business. So you can spend 1 minute on this, and if you do it right, it doesn't take a ton of time to understand a market slide. So we talked before about a stacked Venn diagram where we're looking at the total market, and then the available market, and then your actual obtainable market, which we're going to do a bottom-up analysis. We're going to actually make a projection of our revenue for a time-bound period, 3 or 5 years. So it's the second number, which is the available market, that kind of gives you less, it de-risks the investment a little bit, because that's a more attainable goal than the total addressable market, the TAM, which is like the worldwide spend. So we see a lot of decks where people will say, okay, it's such a huge market. If we just get 1/10 of 1% of the total market, we're going to make this much money. That to me is laziness. That means that they really haven't done their projections to understand where they could be. And so it's a little bit of laziness, a little bit of naivete, and a little bit of not understanding what their investor audience wants to hear. And you should focus on the major market in this TAM, SAM, SOM slide. But if you have secondary markets that you intend to penetrate in the next few years, you can do a separate slide on that to show that you know what your beachhead market is, but you have a plan for expanding your market. So once again, we're going to have a poor example. And there is so much going on in this slide that it's really hard to understand what they're talking about. But this was a company that was working with managed care facilities for baby boomers. So as people are aging, they can't take care of themselves anymore. They're moving into managed care facilities. And he was trying to demonstrate that the boomers are getting older and they're going to need more and more of this type of care. And so it's going to go from 2.7 million beds in 2020 to 5 million in 2030. In just 10 years, it's going to almost double. And this graph on the right is showing the population and their ages. I don't think that's necessary. So I remade this slide and I kept his background. And it just took the main points. Okay, 10,000 per day are turning 65, and 52% will need long-term care. And so the bed projection here gives an idea of the growth in the system. After this, he should be actually explaining what his service at the rate that he's charging, how much money that can make, because these details that talk about users or beds or potential things don't actually describe how much money the company can make. And here is a better one. This one has this is a construction company, and he starts off with a number that is not in dollars, 1.3 million US contractors, but he knows who his customer is. It's a large contractor, and there are 15,500 of those. And then contractors that have more than 20 employees. There are tons and tons of contractors that have 5 or fewer people working with them. So he has defined his market for which customers he's going to go after, and then how much money are in those various markets. So 1.8 billion is a large market. Achievable, he thinks, is 144 million. And in the short term, he thinks he can get to 45 million. All right, competition. I told you I was going to put this in the right place in the deck. So the competitors help an investor to understand how hard it's going to be for you to penetrate the market. So if there are some customers out there, that's actually better than not having any customers out there. But you have competition, whether there are competitors or not, because a main point of competition is people doing nothing. So status quo can also be your competition. So you should be thorough in your research and then use the biggest competitors, because if you are presenting to people and talking about your competitors, people can easily pick up their phone and describe what the product is and see who else immediately is already providing that solution. So you can do a rack up, and we'll show what that is in one of these examples. And that is where you actually compare your features versus your competitors' features. And if you're doing a price comparison in that rack up, you should check it just before you present to make sure that the prices haven't changed. And you really are only going to spend 1 minute on the competition. It's just one of those things. It's kind of a checkbox so that the investor knows that you've done this work and you understand where you might fit in the marketplace. So once again, we have a poor example. This is an actual slide that came in a deck to us, and they're saying, okay, who is the competition? All professional sports teams, such as the NBA and the NHL, and then also college level sports teams. This company wanted to create a brand new sporting event for sumo wrestlers. And so they were comparing themselves to all of the established sports that are out there. Okay, now once again, we have something from High Bear. And so High Bear put this as a rack up. And so they have their features first. And as you craft your competitor slide, you're going to make sure that the features that you're bringing up are features that you excel in. You're not going to bring up a feature that you're poor in. And then he lists the several different competitors they have, and then they discuss the price point. So their product has a lot more features to it, with the pour over and the cold core and the insulation, and actually having 2 different cups that you can use that are part of the unit. And then he does the thumbs up as a darker and more noticeable feature that's a yes versus the light gray X's, which mean that the feature is not included. So that's one of those subtle things where you can make your product stand out more by having a larger, more bold, yes, this is the feature that we have. And then the others, you can make whatever the other thing is smaller and less bright. Here is another example. This group used larger green check marks and smaller red X's to indicate the features that are present or not. I think that I have messed up this top row of the slide. So I think theirs looked much nicer than when I copied over to mine. So this was a pair of students who won a competition up at UNR. And it's the Sontag competition they have every year for startups. And they get a $50,000 prize, which they don't actually have to spend on their startup, but they do get the prize. So this duo was taking a Tacoma truck bed and then building a camper on top of it that used marine quality parts, which meant that they were longer lasting than your typical RV and also waterproof. They had solar panels up on the top. And because they were using the Tacoma truck, the wheelbase was smaller, enabling this truck to go to more places. So you could get farther off-road with this model. And then it's compared to several other models in terms of price and features. So their very first one that they compare against is the most expensive one to show the contrast. And then the least expensive one is just the camper part that goes on top, which is only $38,000 and doesn't include the truck. So their closest competitor looks like it's the Tiger Bengal, except that they don't have all of the features that Stern has. They've changed their name to Truck House now. Okay, next slide would be business model. And this is where we describe what we're selling, to whom, and how we make money. And so if you have a consumer product, then you're also going to explain what your costs are. If you have something that's more like software, you're not going to describe what it actually costs to make it. So how do you make money? Do you have different tiers? How are you delivering the product to the customer? So if you are making a physical product, are you selling directly? Do you have a website where you sell, or are you using distributors? Are you selling into wholesalers and then they're selling to retail places? Are you doing both? Because you could be. If you are doing both, selling on your own website, but then also selling through a distributor and people can find your product in a supermarket, then you're going to talk about the margins that are different for each way of selling. If you have your own website, you're going to have a higher margin because you're going to sell it close to the same price as a retail outlet will. But in order to get the retail outlet to stock it, you're going to have to heavily discount the price to the wholesaler because they need to make their percentage as well, but you don't have to worry about selling. So you can spend 1 to 1.5 minutes on this because it can be kind of complex. It's your business model. And so this was a company that had a piece of software that was supposed to make it easier for people who were attending trade shows to capture information at the trade show. So for their business model, they were actually showing us who their customers were: the space owner, the convention organizer, various vendors, and then also the people who are going to the conventions. So they saw 2 revenue streams: a portion of ticket sales and targeted advertising. However, this does not describe what they're going to make money. How much are they going to charge the convention space owner? How much are they going to charge individual vendors? Are they going to charge or not the attendees? So we really don't have enough information on this business model slide. They haven't thought it through, and they haven't even made any assumptions about what they can charge. And then here we have another poor example. revenue models, there's so many words on this. It's intimidating to even try to look at. And one of the reasons you don't want to put a lot of words on a slide is because when people are reading, they're not listening. They're reading and they're hearing the words that they're reading in their head. And so they're not listening to the speaker. And people can read faster than people speak. So they get done reading the product, although this would take quite a while to read. They can get done reading the slide, and then they are no longer interested in what the person has to say because they're saying the same thing as what they read. So there are a lot of warnings on this slide. Don't put a ton of words on there. Don't put 2 graphs on there. And then make it very clear and obvious what you're trying to say. So if you go down to the 4th bullet, it says that they're going to have a subscription fee of $2.99 to $16.99 a month. That's a pretty big range. And so they should probably be explaining what the difference is in the different price points. And then they have this advertising thing too, where people are going to pay 50 cents if they don't want the subscription. Just too much going on here. It's not clear at all. So this one is much clearer. So their revenue streams are 2 different sources: individuals who are going to pay $19 a year, and businesses that are going to pay $29 to $1 million a year. Clearly, that requires a lot more explanation because that is also a huge range of pricing. But they are giving compliance software and they're increasing different things for the business customer, whereas the individuals that are going to have this app that goes to Verify Inc. Will just pay 1 flat fee per year. So it is clearer, but obviously the founder needs to explain what these differences are. And this is the hallmark of a good slide. You can get some of the information out of it, but it really requires the narration of the founder to explain what you're looking at. Okay, so here is another one. This was a company that was making a box that looked like a bench that you could put on your front porch, and it was secure. So this was back when porch piracy was big. So they have the wholesale price and they have the retail price on the other side. So this was very clear. And I think that I have probably messed up the formatting on this because it used to be really easy to understand. Yeah, the $4.99 is small. It should be over here on the right side. So sorry about that. Traction. All right, I mentioned earlier, traction is sales. That's revenue. So if you do have revenue, that is going to be of great interest to investors. It means that your product is already developed. It may not be the final product, and in fact, it won't be the final product because you should be iterating and improving with feedback from your customers. So you can show a chart and show what your traction is if you know what your CAC, which is the cost to acquire a customer, is. And LTV, that's lifetime value. So there's always churn with whatever business you're doing, especially if it's on a subscription. So people will just get tired of receiving the stuff time after time on a subscription. So there is a lifetime value that can be assigned to your customers. When you're starting out, it's very difficult to guess what lifetime value is because you haven't been around long enough to know. If you have a lot of churn, which is when you've got a customer that starts and then leaves, if your churn time is short and you're experiencing a lot of churn when you first start out, it's probably because there are some features of your product that are good, that people like, but they're not enough to keep people paying for it over and over again. So that's where you need to go back to your customer validation and talk to your customers more and keep giving them more features that they're looking for. So here is my only good example of traction. So this was a subscription service where a product was being sent every quarter or every month. And they started off with just quarterly deliveries. And so this slide is nice. It shows a nice trend. And it says that they have 1,900 customers that they served over the past year. So you're interested in the retention, though, of those customers. And they know that once they get a customer, that 80% of them are going to make another purchase within 3 months. And so this is a nice traction slide. Next up is team. So investors really invest in people more than they invest in ideas. There are ideas all over the place. It's execution that makes the difference. So you do want to feature your team, and your purpose is to show why your team is going to be successful bringing this idea to the market. So you should show the co-founders, and we should see pictures of the people. And the information underneath each picture should show what role they have in the company, and they should have a few bullet points that explain why this combination of people should be successful with this product. Now, if an investor is interested, they will spend more time on the team and getting to know you. But the idea here is just to create some faith that you guys have experience in the industry and that you come from other companies that are in the industry or that are adjacent, that makes sense why you guys can be successful. Now, if the founder has had an exit before, sometimes the team slide will come very early on because, as I said, the investors invest in people more than ideas. So if a team has a track record of being able to build a company and then sell it or have it acquired or go public, then investors are very interested in those types of people. So here we have a poor example. This person is combining the business model and the team on the same slide. Remember, that's a no-no. We want one idea per slide. And so this person was selling to realtors, and it's supposed to be an app for marketing their listings. And they had the pricing here. So that is part of the business model. But then over here on the team, it was a team of one. And so she only had her name there. And, oh, actually, maybe it was two. Yeah. And then she put in here that she was utilizing this group of developers. So she was not doing her own software development. And so what that tells an investor is that they're always going to be waiting for updates, and they're going to iterate slowly. They're not going to be able to respond quickly. So if anyone is considering a software type of company, investors prefer to know that the developers are on the team and that they are going to be able to iterate quickly. Here is a better, but still not great team slide. I saw this deck twice from these people, and I asked them to include their last names, and they would not do it. And so there can be times when people are working for other companies where they're not willing to put their last name on here, because then you can go stalk them on LinkedIn, find out what company they're currently working for. But investors are less likely to invest in a company that's being only part-time run by the founders. They're not dedicating themselves to it 100%. So investors are less likely to part with their money for that type of situation. And there are lots of words on this slide, and they are not very specific about any other companies that they've worked for. So it's hard to know whether they have any expertise in this field. And here is a team slide that just appeals to me. These guys look nice. They are in casual clothing. They have their two different names and their backgrounds. The fella on the left is a PhD, mechanical engineering, and he's worked at some very big companies, Caterpillar, and he specialized in airflow and fan acoustics. So this is a company that makes a snooze machine. It's a noise thing to help you get to sleep. So background noise. And so we got Matthew over here. He is, oh, you can't even see, or can you see where it says he's definitely not a doctor? So he's more of a marketing guy. And so they were based here in Las Vegas, and he's worked at Zappos. So another company that is kind of a darling of the investors because they built up a company. It was very public facing, and then they were acquired by Amazon. So that's a nice team slide. And then one of our last slides is going to be the ask if we are making an investment pitch. If you are making a customer pitch, then your ask here is going to be for them to either try the product or to make a small order. It depends on what type of customer you are presenting to. But for investors, you have to know whether they are accredited investors or not. When you go to start fundraising, you will hopefully become familiar with some of the rules around it. And it is regulated by the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC. And so you can't make solicitations of non-accredited investors. You can talk a little bit about your ask with them, but you cannot give specific terms. And we're going to set the amount that we are raising and the kind of vehicle that we're looking for. So it can be an equity offering. It can be a convertible note, which is it's like lending money, and then it's going to convert to equity at some time after the term. Or a SAFE. And a SAFE is a simple agreement for future equity. And startups like that because you don't actually have to value the company. At the next round of financing, that's when the valuation of the company will be set. And from that time on, then having a value associated with your company, as you continue to do fundraising, you don't want to go backward in the valuation of the company. That's called a down round. That's when the valuation becomes less than what it was in the prior investment. And so that's generally not a good sign. There are a lot of companies that are actually experiencing that now because the money was so free flowing in 20 and 2021 that more money was invested than probably should have been at higher valuations. And so now it's 2 and 3 years later, and they're looking for another round of funding. And in a lot of cases, the best they can do is keep the value the same, even though this is a later round of funding. What should have happened is the funding paid for growth and expansion. And so you got more customers. So the valuation should go up because you have more customers, you've brought in more revenue, you should be worth more money. So we are now at this point in time seeing some down rounds where it just didn't work out, where they were able to grow their business enough because they took a higher valuation than they should have back in 2021. Okay, so use of funds is, okay, if we're raising $200,000, what are we going to spend it on? Are we spending it on R&D? Are we spending it on bringing inventory in? Are we spending it on marketing? And so when you get to the A and later rounds, they want to see explosive growth. So they're expecting a lot of the funding to go towards marketing. In the earlier stages, you may be paying more for development and setting up your staff and getting the sales pipeline going, things like that. So, but use of funds should show a percentage of the raise that you're doing and what it's going to. If you know that you are presenting to just accredited investors, you can consider putting your ask up front. And they will understand then what the rest of the presentation is about, showing why they need this amount of money that they're raising. So you don't spend a ton of time on this. If they have questions, they will definitely ask. So here we have some examples. And this one is what I would consider a poor one. And it is There's a lot of blah, blah, blah on the left side, and they have put a $sign on the right side, but you have to look into the text there to find that they're looking for $400,000. They don't describe what sort of vehicle is, whether it's a convertible note or a safe. And they say that it's just going to be to cover all the expenses for a startup. Well, that's just not adequate. You need to show how much money in dollars that you're spending on each area or in a percentage. Here is another clearer slide. They're looking for $275K. This is very easy to see. They're going to put $245,000 for salaries and $5,000 for employee benefits. So $250 out of the $275 is to pay for people to work. This is generally not going to be looked upon with much favor because too much of it is being spent on developing the product with these salaries rather than increasing sales or marketing. So the next example, this fella tailored his deck to StartUpNV, which is nice, but he doesn't really tell us what he's doing with this money. He wants $300,000 to start and continue to sell the device in Nevada and all 49 other states. So you got the number of states right, but not enough information on this slide. No idea what the vehicle is, no idea what the valuation is, no idea what the use of funds is. Nice picture though. All right, so this one is a little bit better. This one has financial figures. They're looking for $500,000 for 12% equity or preferred stock. So that tells us what their vehicle is. What's not great is this use of funds on the left side. It's too small. You've got black on dark blue. There's not enough contrast there for people to perceive easily what the different categories are that they're going to use the funds for. So those are things to, like, if it were just a white background, it would be easier to understand what they're talking about. The exit strategy is acquisition, but this doesn't actually have to be on the slide. If they had made this graph on a white background with the labels for the different use of funds areas larger, it would be more effective. The whole key financial figures on the top could go away, seeking $500,000 for 12%. Equity or preferred stock up at the top would make everything just easier to understand. Bigger graph, having the descriptors for the different spend areas larger, and exit strategy gone. It could be remade. Oh, I did. I remade it. So I used a pie chart. I kept the colors that they were using, and it says $500K for 12%, 40 towards staffing, 30 for operating capital, and the rest. So this is just a much clearer slide. Here we have another example that I'm going to remake because there are too many details here. These details can be said, they can be part of narration, but they don't need to be on the slide because it clutters it up and it makes it harder to focus on the things that the founder should want them to focus on. So here is this slide remade. They're looking for $600,000. They've got 400 soft circled, which is nice. And then they're going to use the funds 70% for marketing and 30% for technology. That is technically not quite clear enough, but you get the idea that they're going to continue developing the product and do some enhancements. And then the exit strategy he's going to talk about. That is a much cleaner slide. All right, the thank you slide. You should include a thank you slide. So the thank you slide should have the company logo, the company contact, and a thank you. If you want, you can make a note of your ask again. But this is actually the most important slide in the deck because you've gone through all the trouble of making this deck, and the whole goal is to get somebody to say, tell me more. Let's have another meeting. And if you don't put your contact information at the end, then how are they going to get in touch with you? You'll see in large presentations where there are many different decks that are presented. It's very hard to keep track when you're listening to more than 4 pitches at a time. And so people will just take a picture of this last slide, the thank you with the contact information, so they can get back in touch with somebody. So the notes on the style. So to kind of sum up things, you want to use large fonts. You want sans serif fonts. The serifs are the little tails that are on some letters that make the font look fancier, but can be very distracting to the eye. You want minimal background elements so that the text that you're putting on there or the image that you're putting on there really stand out. You should have a logo on each slide. As you notice, the bottom on each one of our slides here has our logo and the program that we're talking about. Animations, when you go from slide to slide, they can be a distraction. I don't recommend them. Some people love them, but it's like putting lipstick on a pig. When you do a lot of animations, it's like you're trying to make the presentation more like the circus rather than making sure that the content is easily understood. I find page numbers distracting because it's just one more element that's on every page. But I know some investors who actually write down a page number and will jot down a question, and they'll just tell the founder to go back to that slide if they have a question. I tend to write down the topic of the slide instead. That should be on each slide, or it should be understood what each slide's topic is. If you put video in your deck, this has no video because it's the sound that's going to kill you. It's always the sound that fails you when you need it most. Sometimes the video won't play. So if you do include video, it is getting better these days. But if you're presenting in a room that you've never been in before, you can't count on it working. You can't count on there being a strong enough internet signal so that it supports video, which is notoriously large, and it can play very choppy if they don't have good internet. So it's risky. But if you feel like you have to include video these days, then I would suggest that you do it without sound and just talk over the video. So it's nice to have movement in your deck if you can do it. If you can test it beforehand to make sure that it's going to work, then you can just narrate over the video. Once again, just one idea per slide. And if you're using charts, make them as simple as possible. If you're using images, I would caution against using more than 2 in one slide. We had this name up before when we talked about Tam Samsam and markets. This is the business librarian at UNLV. He is great, and he will help you to do the research that you need for market information and competitor information. So take a quick copy of this if you need it. Patrick Griffiths, he's great. The more specific a question you can ask, the better he is going to be able to give you good data to use. And that's it for today. Thank you. And if you need to get in touch with me, there's my contact information. And our last slide has the Slack channel and the check-in if you weren't able to check in. I see we still have only 3 participants, even though I can't see you. So I take it that means that Rob and Brittany are still on, Sam and Brittany are still on, and nobody else came today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any questions?
No, I don't. Do you have any questions?
No.
Okay,
No?
well, you can always reach out to us if you do have questions.
Okay, for sure. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for coming.
Yeah, later.
Bye.